like I said, it's a dirty little secret. It's a small industry. We all hear about who was replacing backgrounds and doing other stuff. You don't hear about it, but that stuff doesn't stay a secret, and it gets spread around.
I'm here with Marshall Krasser, and I wanted to have a conversation with him about his long history. I've known him for 20 plus years, back in the days of ILM, where he actually also worked on some of my wife's first movies. So we've known each other from the get-go, since the start of my career. So I thought it'd be interesting to talk to Marshall about what his unique sort of role is within the digital community, and some of his unique experiences, and maybe go over some of the old movies of his past, because he worked on some doozies of a title. So I'm going to introduce you here to Marshall Krasser. Welcome. Thank you very much for coming to my little interview here.
Hey, no problem. Hi to everyone out there in the ether, as they say, or the digital world. But we're all kind of going through some very unique moments, of course, right now with the whole COVID situation going on. I currently live and reside in Vancouver, Canada, in BC here. And we're all dealing with things as everybody is across the world. So hopefully everybody's being safe and making sure that everybody around them is safe as well. So a little bit about me. I mean, I actually got into computer graphics I would say probably one of the very first few people to get into computer graphics. Now, not in the film industry, but it was working for a company called Design Network in St. Louis, Missouri. I had a summer internship in the summer of '84, and then I was going to graduate in the December of '84, and they had offered me a job at the end of the summer. So I basically just had to go back and just make sure I didn't fail any classes and get my degree, and had a job lined up, and doing basically speaker support slides. And we were also doing these big multimedia shows, the big banks of projectors and stuff like that for some big clients there in St. Louis. And I stayed there till about 1987, and decided, I wanted to see what other opportunities were out there. And at the time, the system I was working on was called a Genographics Workstation. And that was that, and I think there was a Dycomet system. So there were very few systems out there. The system alone was the price tag of it was $250,000 just for the one machine. And Joe would probably laugh at this. I mean, I think it had something like 64K of memory or something. We had limited color to work with, and file sizes. So basically we would do the slides, and then those were output on a film recorder. So we'd have film that we would then cut and put into the slides, and those would be going into the speaker support slides, shows for these clients. So you learned a lot of stuff at that time, over the years as doing that type of work. But it wasn't quite, satisfying enough for me. So, I went to a conference in Los Angeles, and somewhere, I guess it would have been in '87. And there, from that conference, I actually got 3 job offers. So I had a big decision. One was in New York, the other was in Sydney, Australia, and the other was in San Francisco. But I decided to go with San Francisco. I did have some relatives out there, which I thought was good, but I also knew ultimately that George Lucas and Industrial Light and Magic was in that area, and when I moved out there, I did check in with them, and they basically at that time weren't really doing any computer graphics, or what I kind of got was, well, you have to have a degree in computer science to do that. Myself, so I had a Bachelor of Fine Arts degree in graphic design, and also took a lot of drawing classes. My uncle, who was also had been an art major, just says you really need to learn and take as much drawing as you can, because it trains your eyes to be able to see stuff. And he said, trust me, just take as many drawing classes you can, even though you might not be enjoying them. It's not what you want to do. He says it'll help you later in life, which is definitely true, because it did train my eye to be able to see certain things that aren't working, or if they're working. Because a lot of times people will say, well, how did you see that? It's just like, or how do you know that? It's just, you can't put a finger on it, but it's just having that kind of traditional training that I had did transpose and carry over into the computer graphics world.
You sort of build an intuition, so to speak, through skill building.
You want to build that base. I mean, so many people right now, the kids coming out of school and stuff like that are trained. I know, I know how to composite. It's like, well, yes, you've been taught the software. You've been taught how to use this tool, but do you understand other aspects of that? I mean, can you look at a plate and basically break it down and say, okay, it looks like they had a key light here, a fill light here, a bounce light here, all of that type of stuff you really need to be able to break down by looking at a plate. And when I say plate, it's a background for a film, something like that. A lot of times nowadays, we try to shoot either like a Crone sphere, we do a 360, that gives us that lighting so we can see the way they did things, because it's all a cheat. And that's the thing people, forget about. I know there's a lot of this stuff about, let's do everything with ray trace lighting and we put a sun up there and that should take care of everything. But it really doesn't, because on a movie set, the actor doesn't look as pretty just based upon straight light. They'll sometimes put a silk up there to filter the light up and bounce to fill, and they model. It's kind of like even here, I'm playing a little bit with the light. See, if I've got a light over, here to my right that comes in, gives me a little bit of a side light, gives me a little better fill, makes me look a little more handsome, I hope.
You look great. You look great.
And I mean, I can tell with Joe set up, he's got the lighting set up there,
Oh yeah, you can see it here.
Yeah, you can see it there. Yeah, he's got one of the round things. It's that's the type of stuff that you have to be able to look at an image and break down. These walls around me, are white. But if you notice right here, we've got light spilling in from outside. And what do you have? You have blue light that actually gradates because there's the window stops here behind the blind and drops down. So you see the color shift happening there, and you see the color shift across the wall. And then over here, you got warm lights and like there again with the shadows, how things are cooling down. So it's that type of stuff you have to really be able to look at and analyze in order to make things realistic. If you're going for that look in a film, you're not always going for a realistic thing. Sometimes you do a stylization. I also took programming in college. So that's why I went 4.5 years, because I took first did basic programming on a basic language. Then I went to COBOL, which I mean, COBOL is like basically you're writing a story to tell the computer. First go over and pick this up, then do that. And then, so you would end up with like 25 pages of code. So, then I took assembly language, and assembly language is like the shortstop. That's like the psychic, almost direct connection to the computer, because you're dealing with some binary programming, hexadecimals, and a bunch of other stuff. So instead of telling the computer to go over and open the window, you almost just think it open window, and it knows kind of what to do. So anyway, I came out with that. Fast forward, here I've been in San Francisco for a number of years. And around 1994, had a kind of friend of the family who was working at ILM and said that they were looking to hire people for Casper, which at that time, I think ILM was about 75 artists, and they were expanding up to 150. So it was like a really big deal, a really big expansion, and they were looking for anybody who had, any background and stuff. So
this was 1993, 1994. Is that?
Yeah. Well, 94 is when I started. I think it was February of 94.
Just trying to put a pin in the calendar there on when this was happening.
Yeah, it would have been February 94, and they said, look, all we can offer you is a 9-month contract. And I'm like, I don't care. That's fine. I'll take the 9 months. As it turned out, that 9 months turned into almost 19 years of contiguous work there. kind of once we got in, we just projects just rolled and rolled through, and you just kind of kept on going. So that was really something that I think is really hard to find these days.
Yeah.
Since I left ILM in 2012, I've worked at a few companies since then. As things fluctuate and change, some of them shut down, some of them merge. So there's been, a lot of changes, and you kind of have to move with the flow on that.
Indeed.
Yeah. So, so kind of that's how, basically I got in there and started on Casper, did a little bit of work on Forrest Gump. They kind of loaned the Casper roto crew because I was doing rotoscoping and paint reconstruction at that time. They didn't really have much in the way of compositors. I mean, we were trying to figure the whole industry out. I mean, you have to understand, we were still, just working with these Silicon Graphics workstations that, they had pumped out already. I think Jurassic Park had just came out a few months before that. So, the buzz was there. They knew what they could do. It was just a matter of how they could harness it and what they could do with it in the future. But yeah, then I, basically worked on a ton of movies, after that, and started out as compositing, and then moved to compositing supervisor, and then was an associate visual effects supervisor, and did some visual effects supervising on some commercials that we were doing in-house and everything else. So yeah, it was a great opportunity, great learning experience. And back in those days, everything was essentially, compositing was done by almost programming. You were having to input the data in. So that's where that programming background that I had way back really accelerated me past a few people, just because at that particular time it was just, my mind was already trained to think that way. Even though I'm an artist, and sometimes they say artists make good programmers because it's creative thinking. I mean, I would go in and do my programming in the morning, and then on a Saturday or on the weekend. And then in the afternoon, I'd go over to, at the time I was taking ceramics. So then I go to the potter's wheel, and I was making pots, making stuff out of dirt, essentially. Yeah. And it was just sitting there thinking, it's like I'm going from the cutting edge technology to, what is been around for thousands and thousands of years, doing both of them. And that was something that was always kind of cool to me, because it just, anything you learn and you bring to the table from any discipline that you study and stuff helps you. I mean, I tell artists now, I said, basically, take photographs all that, you need to go out and observe. You need to train your eye to see things. You need to find the interesting in the mundane. And there's ways to do that. I mean, we all have a camera with us these days. And, I post a bunch of stuff over on Instagram and stuff like that. And people are constantly, oh my gosh, what camera did you use? And I'm like, my iPhone. And they're like, well, my iPhone doesn't take that. I'm like, well, it's.
I felt that way. Actually, at full disclosure, I've been on a hike with you where we were both taking iPhone pictures of the same cliffs and water. And it was funny when I looked back thinking, like, we were standing in the same spot using our iPhones, and mine looked nothing like yours. Again, being more of a tech, it was funny. It was a great lesson for me, and just, using your eye and being an artist. I see it also with a lot of our kids' photos of our fellow VFX artists who happen to be parents, and their kids' photos, of course, always look great, right? And compositors especially. And maybe if you have a moment, we talked about it a bit. Maybe you could explain what is compositing to the people who don't understand necessarily what that role is.
Yeah, a compositor, I kind of equate it to being a chef in a restaurant, where you have all your stuff that's being prepped and everything, and what happens is you've got someone who's chopped your stuff, and you've got this that's been prepped, and you take all of the pieces, the individual pieces, and you using kind of a recipe, you would take and put those pieces together and deliver, a finished dish. And that's kind of in a roundabout way what you do with compositing, because you're kind of the last line before it goes out the door. By the time images get to you, it's already gone through a whole litany of hands. I mean, once it's been animated, then it goes to the lighter who lights it. Then it's given usually to the compositor, and the compositor either does it himself or works with a rotoscope artist that does the tracing of mats. Let's just say you had a dinosaur and you had to put it behind me. Then you need to trace basically a mat of this here, so that you can isolate me from the background and let you, basically put the dinosaur behind me and then put me back over it, something like that. You kind of work from, I like to work back from front, so everything is stacked. So you'd start with your plate, and then you would put render your dinosaur on there, then you would maybe put me back over, and then you add smoke and you dust, and and all this other stuff just stacks up. So that's kind of it, kind of in a nutshell, because like I said, once it's been compositing, of course, there's editors checking all the line, it's sent in for reviews, and there's comments, and there's the effects sim people who, when the dinosaur, steps and splashes, if we don't have practical elements, sometimes we, back in the old days, we could go out and shoot practical elements. So we would work with the stage, and they would figure out how to, make something would do the splash that we needed. And then we'd use that element in the composite to do it. If we can't do that, then we have an effects artist who will, simulate that and using the computer and software. And then you blend that in. So, kind of the finishing is essentially done in compositing, where you get all the pieces together. And that's what I liked about it. It's also was quick. I mean, back in the early days, I did take a class at the, I think it was the Academy of Art College in San Francisco. And it was an animation class. It was taught by all of the greats at Pixar. I mean, it's funny because at that time, Pixar was still young and small, and they were like, well, you worked at ILM. Why are you here? It's like, well, I want to see if I want to animate. They gave us the Luxor lamp to animate. And I just found that I spent most of my time, instead of animating, I like built the environment that it was in and made it, interacting and dealing with the lights. And so I realized, well, okay, animation isn't quite what I want to do. It was very, to me, it was very clunky. I mean, clunky meaning that spatially it was hard to get the model sometimes to do what you wanted. I could envision it and I could see it, but to get the computer to do it at the time with the older kind of antiquated technology that we all started out with, it was just very frustrating for me.
It's very different now, right? And you were compositing, correct me if I'm wrong, but compositing the old days or back in the day would be much more of a sort of bringing things back to a 2D and working in a 2D mindset. And now, of course, with Nuke, it's sort of like working in a video game, the way I describe it to a lot of people who aren't familiar with the industry, where you're spinning the scene around. You can see behind the dinosaur, the front, you can see the back of your head, the front of your head, potentially, and spin it around, look at it from above. That's different, right? I mean, you've progressed through all of that history.
Yeah. I mean, over the time, all that stuff kind of moved up through, and sometimes you'll be talking to the young artists, and I'm supervising or something, like, oh no, I can't do that. And it's like, what do you mean you can't do that? Don't say you can't do that, because there's always a way to do it. What do you mean? Well, it's like, well, the plugin won't do it. I said, well, okay, but what's the plugin doing? Well, I don't know. It's like, well, think about what the plugin's doing. And see if you can dissect it, because whatever that plugin's doing is something that you can recreate. The plugin usually is there just to make things a little easier. I mean, when we would write code, it was just like, I got tired of doing the same thing over and over again. So I'm like, well, why not? I'm just going to write some code that gives me a baseline, and I just plug in a few parameters, and then I'm already like a step beyond things. I don't need to see the whole stack of what it's doing, because I knew what it was doing. And you take that whole stack and you condense it down to, 4 lines, here's a slider for this and that you can key. But the problem is people don't understand what's going on behind the scene. Well, behind the curtain, as they say, that's kind of the what seems like it's the magic portion of it. It's just the stuff that you're asking the computer to do.
Yeah, I've always enjoyed the fakery of it, meaning like in effects, you were given the example of a dinosaur foot coming out of the water, and how an effects artist might make it so that the dinosaur foot is actually an 18-foot wide foot with 1 foot splashes, but then they just zoom the camera out, and as far as the eye is concerned, it's just a dinosaur foot, but they
Yeah.
play with the physics so that the eye often doesn't make it look more real, because the funny thing in VFX is often if you make it look real, well, the director's going to like, it doesn't look good enough. You have to make it look bigger and better than real. So effects artists and Excel compositors are often doing these tricks to just, as long as it hits the eye with the final product, it doesn't matter whether that was shoving something in front of something, bringing in a weird light or a shadow. It doesn't really matter how you got there. It only matters that 2D final screen shot right on that frame looks that way at the end. It doesn't matter how you get there, and the way people get there. It's like there's 1,001 ways to solve for X, and it's always fun to watch all the different ways artists get to sometimes even the same look using 2 very different approaches. Right?
That's
it always blew my mind as a
and people are constantly like oh, the computer did that. It's like, no, the computer is a tool. That's what it is. And what I tell people, I says, you take something like a pencil, and you give this pencil to like a 3-year-old, and you're going to get a scribble. You give the same pencil to like Leonardo da Vinci, and you're going to get a masterpiece. Same tool, same thing. It's just a matter of how the tool is utilized. And that's really all that the computer is. It's just another tool. And if you can get past that and let your creativity start thinking and flowing, then it opens up the world for you. Basically, is what it comes down to. But so many people say, oh, that sounds fun. Yeah, the computer does it all for you. It's like, yeah, it helps. It's like I said, it's just a very expensive pencil.
It's like saying it's a nice paper you wrote. Microsoft Word just did that for you, right? No, it's a tool, right? It's you just left it, and these tools that you have, these computer graphics tools, are immense and feature rich, like you wouldn't believe. So most folks, even using these tools, only use a portion of what those tools available to them. Whether it's Maya or whatever. It's amazing. The tools are so versatile that people just use aspects of them. And I find very few people who actually know how to use the whole tool, except for folks that I deal with on the vendor side who work at Autodesk or such. And, it's amazing complex.
Yeah, and a lot of that. Like I said, there's a lot of different approaches to things, because some facilities prefer having what they call a generalist, someone who can do a little bit of everything. The issue, of course, with generalists is some are very talented, don't get me wrong, but it's hard to specialize, and get every component of what you do to be, at the same level. You'll start getting these mixed levels, and just because someone is, a technical director or lighter, doesn't mean that they're going to have good compositing skills. Their compositing skills could be down here. And that's the thing that I think the people in the industry are always trying to put visual effects artists in as a widget, because that's how business operates. Okay, we need 20 widgets, so let's go out and get 20 widgets. It's not just about, pointing at the screen and saying, fix this, fix that. It's a lot more than that. You also have to have a really good understanding of your crew. You need to know your strength and your weaknesses of your crew. And when I say your crew and your team, it's not just an individual. You need to know each individual's strength and weaknesses. And, what you really should try to do is elevate the artist. Don't pigeonhole. That's the thing. Give them the opportunity. If they're struggling with this, maybe if you've got the time and you can do it, you give them a shot that has that, because that's going to force them to move up and to learn. But if you keep giving everybody the same thing that they're comfortable with, here, let's just give them this driving comp because they do driving comps really good, then that's all they stay at that level. They never accelerate up, and they never move kind of beyond that. And they get really bored. I mean, I would, if you're doing the same thing over and again. It's like, oh, geez, like I can do this in my sleep, and that's the thing. I mean, I will say driving comps are not easy, and they never have been, and they never will be. And so I had someone say to me, a producer say to me once, well, you've been doing these for years. Why does it take that much time? And it's like, because every plate that's shot has a different set of circumstances and a different set of things that you have to deal with.
When you say driving a shot, or you're talking about literally like a car driving with things moving, is that's
It's like, the typical stuff. Someone's driving down the street. What they've done is they'll throw like a blue screen behind me, and suddenly, I can put, whatever the world's behind me there. You can switch it out. It's the typical, the blue screen, green screen. That's another component that you have to deal with. People have this, I recently had a client say, well, we'll just wrap that pole in green. And you can remove it. And I'm like, no, there's no reason to put it in green. And they're like, well, doesn't it help you remove it? And I'm like, no, it's there. I got to get rid of it anyway. What I need is a clean plate. So, once you're shooting like this, just move the camera just a little bit so I can see behind it. And I can use that as an element to move back over and to patch this area. Plus, the other thing that I found out, I've learned over the years, it's like maybe when they get into post, that thing that's bothering them, they don't have the money to really get rid of it. So if you put green on it, you force them into removing it. But if you've left it natural the way it's supposed to be, sometimes they might go, that's how much? Oh, no, that's fine. Yeah.
We love the lamppost.
Yeah, we love the lamppost. We'll just leave it in there. It's okay.
Stylized.
Yeah. And so just because you putting someone in green doesn't, isn't this magic bullet. And everybody's seen these making ofs. Everybody thinks they're an expert on a lot of this stuff. I'll tell you right now, I've done a lot of demos, and those demos are made to look kind of sexy, and made to make you think things are sometimes that easy. Sometimes they're made to make things, look hard, and sometimes they're easier than that. There's been times in the past where it's like, don't say this, don't say that, because we don't want the client to know sometimes how easy we can do this. And when I say easy, it's not really easy. It's just,
I know what you mean. Low labor hours in the end. Less costly.
Yeah,
gotcha.
That's
less
exactly
steps.
what it comes down to.
It's all about labor hours.
Yeah.
People don't get it. It's the biggest cost in making visual effects is labor hours, followed by rendering and computers. But the big one,
and that's the thing. People, when you talk a difference between 2D and 3D, we touched a little bit about that. 2D is primarily just a composite. So you have, a lot of times you'll have just one person, a compositor, who might be, like I said, doing their own roto, or you have a rotoscoper to do that. So that particular shot, like the blue screen or green screen driving comps we were talking about, where, I'm standing, put the actor in front of that, and you key it out. The blue and green there's computer algorithms in there that allows you to get a lot of it keyed, but there's still a lot of work you have to do to deal with stuff like this.
Curly hair.
Hairs.
I love the curly hair.
I would hate to have to get rid of all this stuff here if I was doing that.
I make it real easy for the roto folks.
But sometimes you'll get what you have helmet head because you've lost this detail. It's like, no, you got helmet head. And it's like, basically, it looks like someone's pushed down. If you look close, you'll see this. You'll see it in a lot of stuff. Some people don't care because they don't really have the budget. So some people really fine tune and they want to make sure you get every little pixel in there, which to me, can be too much. Doing this pixel, we have a word for it, but I won't use it. Basically,
pixel fixing.
Fixation on things. Yeah. That is something that to me is at times a waste of money, because you really don't need it there. It's, visual effects is there to tell the story. If it's not distracting you, if it's not pulling away from the image, the shot that's going on, it's a waste of money. I sometimes contend people who fixate on that because that's all they can see. They can't see the big picture, and they feel that they justify their job by pointing out these differences. But generally speaking, no one is going to be sitting in their mom and dad's basement with the plate and the shot and going A, B, A, B. Oh, look, they changed that. They moved this. And so to me, that's a huge waste of time and effort and money.
Money is the big part there. I used to say to supervisors, and I would say, if the studio gives us another $5 million to make this movie, it's not going to make another 15 or 20 million in the box office because they spent another 5 million. And that's part of it. There has to be a good enough, which has to look great, but it just has to look great enough. Not, as great as it could possibly be, because you could always make it look better. You could always render it more. You could.
A shot, to be honest, there's no perfect shot.
Hmm.
I would question anybody who says that. I mean, there's always something that can be changed. There's always an opinion. Always someone has something else you could do. I mean, over the years I've had to physically drag shots out of artists' hands because oh yeah, but I want to still do. It's like it's fine. It's fine. It's good enough. There's no
One
sense doing
second.
it.
It's gonna be 1 second on the screen. It's flying by.
And
And
I've
yeah.
challenged him. I said, okay, in a year from now, I'm going to pull this shot back up and I'm going to say, I'm going to let you view it once and you're going to tell me what was wrong with it. And I did that, a year later, and the artist is like, yeah, I see what you're saying. I didn't see it. But you get so close to it and take it so personal. But, I mean, I've got some stories where I've seen people worked all night and the supervisor the next day said, let me see the take that you had at 6 p.m. yesterday afternoon, not the one that you finished at 8 a.m. this morning. And he actually said, okay, well, we're going to ship the one from yesterday.
Crushing
Well,
the artist's soul.
Well, I'm trying to let them understand that they were overdoing it. I mean, I left that night about 1 a.m. and I said, guys, this is good enough. I mean, really, there's no reason to deal with that. So I wasn't on the radar in the morning when the producer came in and realized that they were, into double time.
Yeah, billing all that time. That's the flip
Billing
side
all that
here.
time.
And
Yeah.
you're not allowed to work for free. As much as
Right.
some places would love it, it's very, very verboten.
Yeah. And I mean, that's the thing as I've moved up, as being a supervisor at this point in time, I first went on set doing on-set supervision for, let's see which one it would have been, Galaxy Quest in 19 came out in 1999, but I think I was on set for 98. We shot a lot of stuff in LA. So that was my first experience doing it. So, essentially it's been on and off and more recently, now that I'm more working on, I'm still working on some feature films, but primarily most of the work right now is the streaming platforms. It's a nice platform because it lets you tell stories a little bit easier. So it's not like a broadcast show, where you're just kind of churning out stuff. It's you're spending time on this stuff. They have a little bit more budget usually to work and make it look good. And that's kind of where, I kind of made that switch, somewhere around, probably 2014. So about 6 years ago, I realized kind of streaming is where things were going and got, more and more involved with that type of stuff, and working on those type of shows.
Most of the visual effects companies are getting a significant portion of their work from streaming episodics, which can sometimes be like very long movies. And sometimes they're delivering them episodically, in which case it's a little more like a traditional TV churn of, getting it done and getting it out and working on the next one. And I've seen both types out there. You had mentioned, go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say that's exactly what it is. I mean, I like those. I like doing those shows. I mean, like I said, more people I think have seen my work or our work, the company that you're working for in your team, they've seen our work more from the either broadcast or streaming.
Sure.
You'll say I worked on a film and they're like, oh yeah, I didn't go see that.
Yeah. They saw it once, whereas streaming, they're often watching it again and again, or they're watching it over periods of time. And so that's great.
Yeah. But I think the artists have a little bit more, understandably so. There's the seduction of the feature film. And the main seduction of the feature film is that you get to sit in the theater by yourself after everybody's left to look at the credits and see your name roll by.
I kind of miss that myself, but it's a treat, and to know maybe a few family members, who get to point out, it's my nephew, it's my uncle.
That's usually it. But usually you look around and you're the only one sitting there.
Absolutely,
so
but
it makes you feel good. And you don't get that, generally speaking, with the streaming and the other stuff, and that's why I think some of the artists who really are getting in the industry really want to see that name up there, and I don't blame them. I mean, there is something nice about sitting there and you're done. It's like, there's my name. I really, I worked on it. I mean,
if it's a big hit, it can help with your the name recognition and interviews, and you're telling folks what you've worked on. I mean, to say that you worked on Star Wars and things like that, it helps. But the unfortunate side of that too is you can work on, I'm not going to name any names, but some really awful movies that get really awful reputations that you spent 2 or 3 years of your life devoted to, and it like barely made it out of the gate before it just fell flat, and it goes down as one of the worst this or that ever. And you're like, your name's attached to it. That can be the downside of a big feature. So rare, but it does happen. Now, you had mentioned earlier that you some on set and being on set. Can you just give the folks a little idea of what is a computer graphics artist or a team of computer graphic artists doing on set traditionally? And I'm not talking about the new virtual production stuff. That'll be a separate video. But traditionally, there's been visual effects artists on set while the movie's being shot. Can you explain what it is they're doing?
Yeah, generally, like I said, it all has to do with a couple things. It's data acquisition. And when I say data acquisition, you usually have a data wrangler there what they're trying to do is record the lens information that the cameras were using, the height, the tilt, the distance to subject. You go out and measure the set, so you knew exactly, that this was 1 foot here, so that when you got it back into the computer to start doing your layout and your tracking and match moving, you knew what the real world measurements were and how to do that. So that's one aspect of it, kind of the data capture. That's not necessarily as critical sometimes. Because these days you run it through like some of the solving software for some of the tracking, and it'll say, okay, this lens was a 23.75. Okay, well, you can override that because it's solved it and it thinks that's the lens it was using. But if you know what the lens set was and it says, no, we were shooting on a 20, you just go back and plug in the 20 millimeter lens, and then that will automatically set it to be the correct world, and you're going to have a better track to lock things. So there's the data acquisition. That's one aspect of it. The other aspect is, making sure that we are able to get what we need, like I said, when we go back in. So if we're doing a blue screen shoot, we will put track markers on the blue screen. That allows you a point to track, because otherwise you just have a solid sheet of blue or green that you don't know what is if a person moves or the camera moves, you don't know really what was happening back there without some point of reference. So that's what the track markers will give you, is a point of reference to be able to track. And there again, you usually get the distance from the person, all the way back to the screen, so you know how far that depth was, so you can calculate a bunch of that stuff. Some places just will take their green screen and grid it all up with markers. I personally tend to, having came up through the plate reconstruction and knowing that everybody's on tight budgets, if I can do anything to save some money, I will. So sometimes I'll run out. I'll realize that there's a track marker that's hovering like right behind my head that moves through this hair. I will run out and move that marker out of the way so that it's not interfering and I don't have to do paint reconstruction or cleanup later.
That makes sense.
Someone said, why are you doing that? I mean, people just set them up and walk away. It's like, well, yeah, because they're not having to deal with having a budget. I mean, that's the thing.
Yeah, it'll save you labor hours later, right? It's less money to spend.
And
it's all about the labor hours.
It's about the labor hours. And that's if I can stop having to pay for this track marker, that's going to give me more time to do something else that's more interesting. Now I know that a lot of things, everybody's talking about the virtual production. I know, Joe, you'll probably talk later with someone else about this. It's great. A lot of those virtual those virtual backgrounds, lets them get interactive lighting. Like you see here as I'm moving in front of the light, you're doing that type of stuff. I mean, the dirty little secret out there is that most people don't talk about is a lot of backgrounds on those shows have been totally rotoscoped and replaced. They don't talk about that. They just say, look what we did. And look
Well,
how
at the
great it
very
is.
least, well, yeah, it's definitely not removed computer graphics. I think I had some folks in the rendering community, some of the vendor side asking about, hey, is this a threat to all the CPUs? I was like, no, this might, take a few a few shots away, but all those seams have to be cleaned up at the very least. And like you said, there's sometimes they're replacing the background, but of course, the motorcycle or the speeder still has the beautiful reflections, and that's fine. I mean,
Yeah,
I think it's great technology, and it's of course blowing up everywhere. So I think
it
a
is. It is.
year
But
from now, we'll see where it settles in, who's really what stages are staying, and which stages actually got built.
yeah.
A lot of them been
Well, that's
announced.
it. That's the thing. Like I said, it's a dirty little secret. It's a small industry. We all hear about what who was replacing backgrounds and doing other stuff that you don't hear about it. But that stuff doesn't stay a secret, and
Hmm.
it gets spread around. And I mean, I think it's definitely something worth looking at and investigating. The one thing is that it takes a special kind of, I think, director to be able to utilize it efficiently. Uh, and I don't I don't mean to call people out, but when I say directors, some directors are better than others. It's because some directors, put everything together in post. That's where they
Hmm.
have some more like creative ideas. Some directors have already pre-vised everything and just go through the motions of capturing it, so you don't get these happy accidents that happen, and you kind of get locked into things. So there again, it's a pencil. It's
Hmm.
another tool to use,
Yeah,
and
and it's really added to the toolkit. I don't think people
yeah,
thought it was replacing something, and like so many other new technologies, they just add to the palette. They add to the toolkit.
that's all
They
it
become
does.
another complementary, whether it was the virtual production of 2 years ago for the Lion King animated stuff, whether it was just doing previs, what folks like Company 3 and folks were just doing with previs
Yeah.
early on with game engines. And it's just adds and adds, which is great from a creative perspective. I like people always have that fear factor of it taking out some new technology, but no,
No,
it
it
rarely
just
does. It just makes adds to the bouquet,
yeah.
right?
It opens it up. So there again, once you're out there, you're making sure you get the plates and all the pieces that you need. I mean, I had a particular case the other night where we were being asked to add a certain kind of effect to a shot, and I said, well, we can either sim that, or we can have an element, and maybe we can shoot an element. So brought that up with the showrunner, saying, well, we can do a sim and it's a little more expensive, but we have the facility, and if we have an extra camera, we can just throw a green screen or a black, which in that case, it was black there. And we just went out and shot it, and then we can put it right in the shot. So that's the thing, is I prefer shooting practical elements. I mean, a few years ago, a buddy of mine, um, we were working at a company, and we had to do this thing where, swords were, fighting and sparks. And initially it was bid out to do, effect sims on it. The effects artists on that show were too busy doing big, massive water sims and stuff like that. They had no time to deal with sparks. I mean, that was low on the priority list. So he had an early digital camera that was pretty good. So we went, took it into the studio down in the corner. There was a dark corner, kind of like where all the compositors were, and I had gone to one of the stores up here and got a flint, like for fire starter. And so I'm dressed in black. It's a dark corner, and we expose it down, and I'm sitting there doing this, and we're getting sparks, and we're shooting that. And suddenly we realized all the young compositors and artists came up, and they're like, "What are you guys doing?" It's like, "Well, you need a spark in your shot, right?" I said, "Yeah." I said, "Well, we're shooting that." And he goes, we can do that? And I'm like, absolutely. It doesn't have to be computer generated. So we
Yeah.
downloaded it, and within 20 minutes, he had it in the shot,
Yeah,
and
an
it
image
worked.
engine. I saw it all the time when I was there. They had a nice good camera kit there. People were checking it out all the time to go out, just out in the parking lot, shoot a little of this, shoot a little of that, put it in. And you could model it and light it and texture it, or you could just go blink and
Yep.
it's just gonna be this big in the back of the scene. I love seeing that. And again, it's those tricks. It's those everyone thinks it has to be the big composite, the big render, the big effect. No, it's sometimes it's just these little tiny tricks.
It
Even like in
is.
the can stuff, the most typical one everyone knows about, right? Like even in Lord of the Rings with Gandalf just sitting a little further back, and now Now Frodo's a little hobbit. It's like these little tricks of just camera tricks. That kind of thing goes well into the digital realm all over the place, where people are just making it so that your final output to your eye looks great, but boy, in the background, you have no idea the kind of little funny fakeries that they had to do to make that look like that. It's beautiful to see.
It's all fake. I mean, that's the thing. It's all sleight of hands. I mean, you're a magician. That's it. You're just trying to mix things up.
You're up here in Canada now. You, like myself, have come up from the States to up here to Canada long term. Was it the episodic work and the visual effects industry that brought you up here? Can you say a little bit about what brought you to Canada?
Well, yeah, it was, after I left ILM, I went to work for a company, and they were in LA, but they had recently opened a branch in Vancouver. And, the whole plan was, I think, secretly, was to get me up here to help get the, to be kind of the adult in the room at the time, because they had done a lot of hiring, but it was with a lot of locals, and there just wasn't a lot of senior people up here at that particular time. Now we've got a lot more, but
it's really matured. It wasn't like that in 2014, 2013.
But when I came up at that time in 2012, it wasn't. So that got me up here, and then I just really enjoyed it up here, and didn't want to really leave. I mean, my commute. I mean, at the time I was walking to work. I lived in Yaletown, and our office was in Gastown, and all of the facilities are pretty close around. So, I mean, even as it is right now, I mean, I live, from the office, which no one's really in right now because of the whole COVID. We're all going virtual here. It was, 3.5 miles. I mean, some of my commutes, if there's no traffic, it's like 10 minutes. I spend more time getting into the parking garage and walking to the office than driving in. So
it's like a small town, big city sometimes up here.
Small town, big city. A lot of good public transportation, all that other stuff. So that's kind of what kind of kept me, up here and interested. And, since then, I got my permanent residency, and then 2 years ago, this November, got my citizenship. So,
Congratulations.
Yeah, thank you.
I'm jealous.
Now I'm basically, that allows me, as being a dual citizen of the U.S. and Canada, it allows me to kind of work cross-border if I have to go down to work on a project in the States. It's also going to come back here. There's no problem as far as visa is concerned, because I just kind of go down and
we like you and I both are just simply allowed to go both directions. Functionally, the border is not really even closed for us, although quarantines are still in existence. And I guess it's also affected your on-set world now, right? You're working on set now, but in a post-COVID environment. Little snapshot of what that's like day to day here. How's it different?
Yeah, it's we are being given a COVID test 2, sometimes 3 times a week, depends upon if there's a holiday in there. So they come in and they do the nasal swab. They don't go way up, the brain tickle, as they say, but they do this the test here. So that's twice a week. And then when you're on set, we have masks that we wear. So we're basically this way all day long. You're able to take it off when you if you go away from set and get outdoors, you can take it off, just so long as you're staying 6 feet, of course, away from everything. But it has changed a little bit, but for the most part, it's a situation to where you're losing some of the direct close-up personal contact with the director, the DP and stuff like that. You can still talk, but it's a little trickier to deal with, unfortunately. They get into certain things. I mean, we're there in case any COVID issues come up, because there's certain scenes they can't really shoot the way they used to, especially crowd replications. You can't put 200 extras in, shoot them, have them move over and do that, because they have to remain that
so the
distance.
work you're doing is different because of COVID now, because you can't shoot crowd scenes and things like that.
Yes.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
It's changed a little bit. I mean, we have a digital way of doing that, that has been used already in a few shows that works out pretty good. But it's there again, there's a cost with that. It's Is it more costly than bringing in 200 extras? I don't know. I mean, I don't know what an extra gets a day, 100, 150, $200. I don't know. So you have to calculate it up, but it does add more post budget to it.
Mhm.
So there's also been cases where certain scenes, the way they were written, had to be changed because the room that was built was too small. There's can only get so many people in, so it's affecting the way sets are being constructed now. So that I think is something that our on-set, construction and everything is figured out. You have to have more flyaway walls so you can just open up the set, so you're not in a physical little room, and you get sometimes what you don't see is that there's an actor actress sitting there on the bed, but there's 10, 15 people around. It's behind the camera stuff that goes on that you need in there. And now they have to do it a little differently. If they have to do last looks, if the makeup has to come in and the camera has to clear out, the makeup comes in, does that, wardrobe comes in. They have to do it as this whole cycle.
So it creates a little more time for each little step to take on, because you don't have people working, you're reaching over with a hair person doing the hair and the makeup person doing the hair, and somebody tweaking the lights all simultaneously has to happen serially. So
Exactly. That's that.
I'm pleased to see that the Vancouver film industry has really picked up the torch and maintained sort of a post-COVID production workflow. And now I just outside my window had a shooting crew out here last week downtown here. So they're all over. It seems like work's back up and running. I see everyone with masks. That's great to hear. I think at least up here, curves still go up, but I feel like we're in a good place for that, both personally and from the industry's perspective.
Yeah, I mean, everybody takes it very seriously, and it is constantly reminded every day in our safety meeting in the morning that's discussed and gone over, and reminders, and throughout the day there's a constant reminder, hey guys, this is getting a little tight in here, you need to make sure you're doing 6 feet. It's funny because most people's conception of what 6 feet are is not really 6 feet.
I've noticed that. Yeah,
on set, I kind of played around. I had a tape measure, and I thought, okay, well, let's pull it out. Oh, yep, yep. Okay, so I'm 4 feet from these people, not 6.
It's like it's more than most people realize.
Yeah, it's more than most people realize.
Yeah, I hear you.
But yeah, right now, I mean, I just read an article that was saying that actually BC right now is actually busier than it was pre-COVID. Of course, we all had the shutdown for a while, and people were out of work for several months, but now that it's picked back up, I mean, there's production crews. We're learning as we go through. I mean, there's maybe, visual effects is there to help if we need to, to take scenes that it's kind of like when you have a stunt that's too dangerous. I mean, you kind of have to look at COVID as that way. Is there a scene here that is too dangerous because of COVID, and we have to do it as a visual effect?
That's a great way to put it. What I did want to ask you about is over on your shoulder is this what appears to be a Sasquatch, and I would like to explain what that is doing on your wall and what.
Yeah. I got it up here. I've got remote property in British Columbia, and Joe's been up there. He can attest to the remoteness.
It's a beautiful cabin, and I almost didn't make it there.
Yeah, it's up Forest Service Road that logging trucks come down fully loaded, and you have to be aware. I've got trail cameras up. I've gotten a lot of deer, moose, elk, and bear just on my 23 acres of land alone. So they are moving through there, and this just is something that we're putting together because. My friend Keegan, who has the property, adjoining property, who's also a visual effects artist. We've heard some sounds up there that we can't really explain. I do have one image on one trail camera that was set up about, I'm going to talk in kilometers because that's what I think in now. It's about 50 kilometers away from the cabin, which I think is about 30 miles further up the remote valley and stuff, and can't really explain what it was. Camera was mounted up pretty high, but it's something that's hairy. People try to say it's a bear, but I just, based upon a lot of circumstances, camera triggers in less than a second, and a bear doesn't move through that fast, and whatever it is more than 6 feet tall. Keegan and I and another buddy who's an ex Canadian Navy Marine. He's our production. We joke.
The non VFX guy in the crowd.
Non-VFX guy. Yeah, and the guy who hasn't had any incidents, because Keegan and I both we heard this one wood knock. We were both together at this certain location, and so he's also heard and witnessed it too. And it's not, that sound we heard was nothing that a wild animal makes. It was the spring. It's like people were like, oh, it was the trees freezing and exploding. I'm like, it's May. It's not that. There's no snow. It's not freezing. We're in short pants. It's not that.
Well, I'll be checking that link out for sure, and I'll make sure to put a link in the posting here.
We have this concern. Let's just say we did get some photographic evidence or video. It's going to be a hard sell because people are like, "Well, you guys are visual effects artists." Yeah, we don't believe it.
That's a good point.
That's what I'm. Be honest. I don't know what it is. I'm not saying it's Bigfoot. I'm just saying, we're going out on a quest. We're going to see what we find, if anything. Maybe nothing. Maybe something.
Can't wait to hear and see what the results are. Well, it's been a real pleasure talking to you, Marshall. I appreciate your time. I'll put a link towards you down here. People can check out your IMdb. So you're prolific. We didn't even go through the whole list. I suggest you take a look. All the big movies are in there, everything from the Star Wars movies. You said Forrest Gump. Harry Potter, which was, again, the one that my wife's first movie that she worked on as a PA with you. So take a look at his IMdb, and appreciate your time.
Hey, no problem. And, everybody who's thinking about getting in the industry, even though it's crazy sometimes, it's a lot of fun. It allows you to explore some of your creativity, and I wouldn't discourage people from getting into it. It's just, things are changing, and 20 years from now, it's going to be totally different than it is today.
Yep. And my favorite part about it is you're constantly surrounded by high caliber individuals. You can't really make it too far in this business unless you work really hard and you try really hard and are really good at what you do. So you end up working with a whole lot of people who are really at the top of their game. And that's one of my favorite parts, being associated with the industry. All right, Marshall, thanks a lot.
Yeah. Thanks, Joe.